Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Venom, number 28. So, this is a pretty fun book. We've been reviewing the most recent arc of Donny Cates' particular take on Venom, with Juan Gedeon doing the artwork, Jesus Aberdov doing the coloring, and Clayton Cowles doing the lettering. And that's part of the larger movement going on within the world of Venom these days, where Cates has kind of reimagined the symbiote as part of this malevolent god called Null, and that's just sort of been this ongoing thing, not only as part of the Venom series, but also the larger tie-in Absolute Carnage, and it very much seems an upcoming event of some kind, I believe called Web of Venom, but I'm not 100% sure on that. If you've seen my reviews of Venom Beyond Parts 1 and 2, then you should probably have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to say about Venom Beyond Part 3. It maintains the fun dynamic of Eddie Brock and his son Dylan, along with the Venom symbiote, all traveling to this alternate universe. And it's a different universe than what we've seen before, with its own little history and details, little nuances that happen to different characters along the way that on the whole I quite like. This book in particular fills in a lot of those gaps that we hadn't known yet, but I felt very much were on the table, like what happened to certain heroes, the history of this world, and how the symbiotes came to take over. And we even learn a little bit more about Codex that I really didn't see coming, but neatly matches. Are you sure there's no sound? That might be you, Anubis, because I'm seeing green on my end. Thanks for joining us in stream, though. Maybe check your setup, though, because I appear to be getting sound. Here, I'll check here. Yep. It does seem to be going through. So, yeah, I like this book on the whole and definitely would recommend it along with the rest of the Venom books. Donny Cates maintains a certain energy and dynamic, a little fun. Oh, Anubis saw one of the covers. This book in particular had a lot of alternate covers. It seems like something they're doing for Venom in general, but some of them look really good. I don't begrudge alternate covers if they're not doing anything to mess around with the comic book store's income or anything like that. I don't believe they are, but I don't know a lot of the details of how Marvel goes about it. You would really have to ask comic book store owners. And I haven't even asked my local store what they think of all that. It's something I just noticed when I was putting together the little preview images for this particular review. Anyhow, so with all that in mind, let's kind of enter into spoiler territory a little bit and get into the book itself. We open on Null working away at Virus, who I lost in the shuffle of things is Matt Gargan, I believe. And he's working on his talking to his universe's version of Dr. Octopus. They have supplied Matt Gargan with the symbiote, but right now it's just kind of studying him, like the symbiote, and it seems kind of curious. And Null is just like, well, kill the alien and start over with a new one if it doesn't start getting its act together soon. Kind of gets into Codex's little personality, like for a very spooky looking villain that's all pale and kind of has like a vampiric touch to him almost. He talks very casually, almost like he's a human. And as we learn more about him in this book, I feel that fits nicely with how he's written. I thought he was just kind of written in a generic, jokey MCU way, but I feel like there's more reasoning behind that. And it also reflects how all these symbiotes are a little unhinged. Good or bad. Matt Gargan is talking about, like, as Codex is examining his virus suit, that it's like, oh, these are all the things I could afford. I just bought them off the black market, so they're just like spare bits of War Machine and pumpkin grenades that he picked up along the way. He mentions how he followed Eddie Brock here, and Codex freaks right out and smashes the table and says, tell me everything you know. Meanwhile, as the book says, in the sewers, Brock talks to Annie, who is Agent Venom in this world, as we learned at the end of last issue. And she is in tears at the sight of Eddie Brock. And she says, so we kind of learned the divergent point in this universe, where basically way back when, hey Karsten, thanks for joining us. So when Eddie Brock was in the church and first encountered the Venom symbiote, instead, in this world, he just killed himself, like he kind of originally intended to do so. And then Annie, in her grief, went to the church and encountered the Venom symbiote a little later, and she became Venom. And everything kind of went from there. At which point, the symbiote started spawning, and that is led to this little group of Agent Venom style symbiotes, such as Cletus Cassidy, who's Carnage, but also Peter Parker and Deadpool, who are also symbiotes and spawn of Venom. Andy Benton is another one. And so they're all this little team. Eddie gets introduced to all of them and understandably freaks out at the sight of Cletus Cassidy, but Annie vouches for him and seems to stand by him. Peter Parker looks shocked at the very idea that Cletus could be evil or something. I like Peter. He doesn't say a lot in this, but he's got like a little mustache going on and has a lot of his friendly spirit to him, even in this dark world. And pretty soon they're attacked by a team of, I was going to say Avengers, but they're really just a group of like X-Men and The Thing. But let's go. It's Sabretooth, Wolverine, Omega Red, The Thing, and Juggernaut. So quite the eclectic group, all clearly bonded with their own symbiote, which leads to a big brawl in the sewers. And it looks pretty awesome. We got all these different symbiotes fighting traditional looking superheroes and villains, but all of them kind of with their own unique powers, and they're all obviously working for Codex. Deadpool decides to blow himself up, and he has a fun little liner. He's like, oh, knock knock, who's there? The only guy who's gonna survive this, and takes the opposing team out. It's a fun little fight and a fun little bit of action. Carson Logan says, what did you think of Venomverse? Do you mean like the Venomverse in this story? Because I quite like it. It's a fun little side world. And what we've seen of it so far has been pretty enjoyable. We then cut back to the lab, and the symbiote manages to bond with Matt Gargan. And he goes back to the Scorpion identity. And Codex is like, all right, good for you. Now get on your knees, swear allegiance to me, and go bring me this Eddie Brock. It's a great moment. And particularly because I hadn't like fully put together like, oh, okay, Matt Gargan is back until like this page basically. And that was cool. Meanwhile, the like Annie and the gang are led to Reed Richards of this world, who is clearly suffering some sort of brain trauma and is a little bit frazzled. Dylan introduces himself by name, and everyone is shocked except for Eddie Brock, obviously. And they're like, oh, you're Dylan Brock? And then they reveal that Dylan is Codex, which is an interesting moment. We know Dylan has strange powers or has something going on with him, and sort of has like these abilities linked to Null and the symbiotes that we don't fully understand, and clearly this universe has some sort of connection to that. So that's pretty cool on the whole. I also one other thing is I do like how oh, here we are. I'm looking at the advertisement for Web of Venom, and then there's this Empire's End book they have coming out. It should be interesting. It looks pretty cool. It does seem like Nala is very much on the rise, and Dylan is somehow connected to all of that, and this universe shows a potential end result of that, of him becoming this villain, and potentially takes over the alternate universe. So it's a pretty interesting book on the whole. Um, Carson says, "Do you miss Flash? Do you miss Flash Thompson Venom?" Well, I forgot to say they mentioned at some point that Flash Thompson became the president when Eddie Brock mistaken Annie for Flash Thompson, but obviously that didn't work out, and Dylan took over. But it's interesting how this is like kind of a Venomized universe, and all of these Venom adjacent characters had their own little role in the history of this world, distinct from like what happened in the world of Marvel. It is a little all Venom focused, and I think there are some questions about like what is this world like day to day. We don't know much about for the average citizen. We There's also a lot of questions about, well, what happened to all the other heroes? Like, has everything just been completely venomized, and how did that affect like the X-Men? Or like we got a sense of that with the Fantastic Four, but we don't really know that for the rest of the superhero community. Still, it's a fun book, and I don't necessarily need us to explore all these things if it is just sort of a little side story, which I feel like it is. And as far as this world being a new roster among the multiverse of Marvel worlds that superheroes or superhero teams can I just kind of okay. Sorry, let me finish my thought there. But so it's just another world that teams and superheroes can visit in the future, which is pretty cool. Where we can see characters from this like emerge in our world for a story or something like that, which is always welcome. The other thing too is, well, this just goes to show that there's always more alternate universes and timelines out there that our characters can visit, and I'm always for that kind of storyline. I was excited about that going into Venom Beyond from the beginning, and haven't been let down by that so far. So this one comes recommended. The whole story arc, it's been fun. Really, the whole series, Donny Cates has been pretty reliable. Anubis was asking, I see a picture the Scorpion has a new symbiote. How did he get it? Well, I just walked through that, so you'll have to go back and watch the stream when you didn't have audio, I guess. But for the rest... okay, so then Anubis asked a bunch of other questions. Is Venom always on Eddie Brock? I don't know what you mean by that. No. Not at this moment. Or, like, not in the past, but at this moment he is. That's what I was trying to say. Flash to have a new symbiote. Yeah, you're going to have to go back and watch these streams, because I feel like I've covered a lot of that stuff. Or read some of those on your own, because the idea is Flash Thompson really isn't in this story. He's dead, and this is an alternate version of Flash Thompson. No worries, Anubis. I just, I can't like explain all of that at once. And we're more of here to just review this particular book. I feel like that's just a lot you're asking. But you did ask more a broad question about all of this stuff, so I think you know some of this. You just go back and watch our Venom Beyond reviews then if you're confused beyond the specifics, because you were saying, what do you think about the symbiote lore and the god symbiote creator, which this is all kind of linked to. And I really like all of that stuff. I was saying at the beginning of the review, I think it's a strong take on Venom, and overall a pretty cool direction for this character. It builds on the world a little bit without necessarily conflicting too much with what we already know about it, and I like that on the whole. It's a better take than some of the other stuff we've dabbled into before concerning Venom and his origins, is my belief. Carson says, do you think we will get Venom in Spider-Man Miles Morales? Oh, the video game. That would be cool. One thing I am curious about is how they handle villains a little bit in the Miles Morales game. Miles has a particular connection to Venom that is worth exploring, and they've actually done so in this Venom series before. But I think on the whole, one weakness, we'll say, of the Spider-Man PS4 game, and it's not a huge weakness because that game is fantastic, is the villains are a little weak in a certain sense. You don't spend a lot of time facing them. It feels like there's a lot of build up to the Sinister Six, and by the time we get to them, it feels a little rushed getting through them after. It's a weird aspect of the game that I would hopefully like to see them work on a little bit in the Miles Morales one. I'm curious if there's going to be a bit of a shift towards more Miles relevant villains like the Prowler, maybe ultimate versions of his enemies or that sort of thing. But the other angle of it all is Peter Parker's not old in the PS4 universe they've created. And I'm curious what Peter's role in all of this is going to be, how they're going to handle some of that stuff, and what villains are going to be present relative to those that were present in the PS4. Like, are we going to see Octopus, Kingpin, those kind of villains again? Or are we going to dabble into some of the bigger names that were actually left out the first time around, such as the Green Goblin, Harry Osborn, in whatever form that takes, and Venom, I guess. But I was thinking of the Goblins because a lot of that was teased in the PS4 era without having been paid off yet. There was a lot of stuff from the PS4 game I thought were kind of hints for what was the sequel. The idea of it all shifting towards Miles does upend that a little bit, and I'm not 100% sure how that's going to go. Carson says, "Hey Arden, do you think you'll do a crossover with Comic Story and Variant Comics? We know Comic Story and have done little things with them in both directions a long time ago, but haven't keep talking about it and haven't gotten around to it. It would be fun to prioritize that a bit and do it. So maybe I'll add that to my more immediate to-do list. Variant Comics we've never really dealt with before, so I don't particularly know them, but maybe I can look into that. And yeah, so I think we'll leave it there because oh yeah, as for Venom, in terms of the Miles Morales thing, I was like, how did we get on topic of that game? I would like to see him, and it would be interesting. They perhaps wisely chose to keep the Spider-Man PS4 game a little narrow in its scope. We only dealt with certain very Spider-Man specific villains. It was all kind of a self-contained story. I'm for that, but I'm curious to see where they go from here because of that. And I was so pleasantly surprised by the idea of the next game being entirely devoted to Miles Morales because I didn't expect that. But it does shift a lot of what I was thinking they were planning for a potential plotline going forward. And I'm curious how all that plays out. Anubis says Miles Morales has more of street view stuff. That's a good point. And Anubis is also saying, I find it sad Marvel can't keep Mary Jane with Peter and try and show us how Peter deals with the family stuff and puts Peter in more important stuff like Avengers and keeps Miles from the more street level. I see. Yeah, that's fair. I feel like his current direction is a little more grounded in the world of Amazing Spider-Man, but I still prefer Miles Morales' current comics over Peter's. So there is that. But it will be interesting to see where that game takes things and how that all works. But yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I think we'll leave it at that. We got a bunch of comics still to catch up on that came out this week, and I still got to go pick those up. So I'll see you guys next time here on Comic Island.